What's the craziest thing you've seen at the airport? Not strange for me, I suppose, but earlier this year my brother and I had flown out of state to visit some relatives. Our flight back was repeatedly delayed due to weather, and eventually cancelled very late at night. The airline gave us a free hotel room and a nice flight for the next day, along with an excessive $40 in meal vouchers we had to use by our flight tomorrow morning. At this point nothing was open for dinner, and our hotel provided free breakfast, so I did the only thing I could think of, walked to the airport Chick-fil-A and said, "Give me as many chicken minis as you can," and gave them all of my vouchers. A few minutes later I was sitting on a plane sharing my 3 to-go bags full of chicken minis with the passengers next to me. Overall I felt good about my decision.
That's an interesting travel story. Flight cancellations can be a hassle, but getting a hotel and meal vouchers helps a bit. Your choice to stack up on chicken minis seems practical, especially with limited options. Sharing with fellow passengers adds a nice touch. It sounds like you made the best of the situation and turned a delay into a decent meal experience. Overall, not a bad way to handle it.
Flying out at 5 a.m. so in security line at 4 a.m., literally like 4 people in total going through security, but I still had to wait 10 minutes in line because the idiot in front of me, middle-aged moderately well-dressed guy, went through the security scanner with almost every metal object he possibly could. Watch on his wrist, cell phone and change in his pockets, pen in his jacket pocket, etc. TSA lady asked him if his pockets were empty and he legit takes out his keys and change to show her and is confused about why she is asking.
It sounds like that guy really didn't have a clue about the security process. It's surprising how some people manage to forget the basics. With so few people in line, you'd expect it to move quickly, but stuff like that can really slow things down. Those early flights can be rough enough without extra delays. Glad you made it through eventually.
Not the strangest but the saddest. I got off a plane and came off the jet bridge into the terminal to see a man getting chest compressions on the ground. That shit is intense and surreal. I assume heart attack. I don't think he made it. Sad face. In more upbeat news, I really like to play airport scavenger hunt when I travel. Find a couple that is obviously sick of each other, find a kid on a leash, find a mom who looks like she's about to lose her shit, find a lovey-dovey couple, find someone hungover, find Karen, etc. Edited for more words and formatting.
That sounds like a heavy scene with the man on the ground. It's tough to witness something like that. The scavenger hunt part is a nice twist though. It adds some lightness to the travel experience. Spotting people in different situations can be amusing. Airports can definitely bring out a mix of emotions. It's interesting how you can find both tension and humor in the same place.
About 9 years ago, I had 3 hours between planes in Dallas. I walked around the concourse, read, got a snack. No big deal. Later, in my weekly phone call with my dad who lived across the country, he mentioned that he was on business and had a layover in Dallas for 4 hours. On the same day and time as me, but was in a different concourse. We hadn't seen each other in years. I was haunted by the fact that I could have taken the airport train over and visited him, had I known. We were in the same airport at the same time and did not know. It was awfully sad to think about. I bought another plane ticket and flew out to see him. And yes, I had to go through Dallas.
That's a tough situation. Just missing each other like that must have felt really frustrating. It's interesting how life can throw coincidences your way, sometimes you just don't realize it. Rebooking the ticket to see your dad was a good move. At least you got the chance to reconnect later on, even if it was due to that strange circumstance.
Leaving Montego Bay to head back to the United States when I'm picked to be randomly checked. They test my hands and it comes back positive for explosives. They swipe my bag also positive for explosives. So they have to pat me down and search all of my belongings. I'm waiting to talk to Jamaican law enforcement. They get there, ask me all these questions before they ask if I had eaten greasy food and carried sunscreen in my backpack. I had just eaten fries at the Dairy Queen that was less than 15 yards from where they were questioning me, and of course I had just spent the week in Jamaica, so at one point there was sprayable sunscreen in my backpack. They let me get on my flight where I proceeded to sob from anxiety.
That sounds like a really stressful situation. Getting flagged for explosives must have been pretty alarming. It's interesting how something as simple as greasy food and sunscreen could cause such a mix-up. It's understandable to feel anxious after that kind of ordeal, especially right before a flight. Hope the rest of your trip was smoother.
While waiting to check in at the airport, a very skinny young guy dressed in an ill-fitting suit gets in line. He jumps straight up in the air like he's on a pogo stick, again and again. He's sweating profusely at the same time. The police quickly show up and talk to him. He can't remember where he's heading. He can barely put together a coherent sentence. He can't stand still. He just keeps bouncing and jumping. He's harmless enough so they convince him to come with them so he can calm down before getting on the plane. They whisked him away.
It's kind of wild to see someone like that in a public place. Just bouncing around in a suit like it's normal. You'd think he'd be more nervous about the whole airport thing. The police handling it shows they recognize he isn't a threat. It's probably better for him to calm down somewhere quiet before flying. Airports can be stressful, and it looks like he's feeling it more than most.
I was at the airport in Istanbul about to get on the upward-going escalator when I noticed a group of adults gathered around the end of the downward-going one. As I got closer, I noticed that they were all happy and excited looking. I then saw a more official person at the end of the downward escalator assisting people getting off and instructing them to join the group. All of the people getting off of the escalator were super happy as well. When I got on the upward escalator, I watched the downward escalator. It was full of happy people, some standing and some sitting. When I got off at the top, I saw another official-looking person. He was speaking to another group of adults. He was instructing them on how to ride the escalator and helping them get on. More people were slowly coming down the hall and joining the group at the top of the escalator and listening to this man giving instructions. That's when it clicked. The people, who were all wearing the same type of traditional clothing, had arrived from somewhere without escalators. This was their first time ever seeing one or using one. They were so excited about it. The whole scene was just too cute.
It sounds like a nice moment at the airport. Seeing people experience something for the first time can be interesting. It's cool how something as simple as an escalator can bring so much joy. It must have been quite a scene with everyone gathering and sharing the excitement. The traditional clothing adds a nice touch too. Just a simple reminder of how different experiences can connect people.
Working at the check-in in Geneva when a business-class passenger going to London asked for my number. I said politely that I was flattered but no thanks. Then, he calmly asked to talk to my supervisor who came. He asked him for my number. My sup was quite embarrassed and told him that we're not allowed to give personal details anyway. He asked him to give me personal permission to do so, and my sup tried to make him understand that he couldn't force me to give my details. I was very professional all the time that guy spent in front of me, trying not to laugh or get upset. He finally took his things and went out without saying goodbye. 2 days after, we received a complaint from London about my supervisor and me not willing to accommodate a very important customer of the company, and we had to explain all the thing to the customer service department. I kept on seeing this guy every week for 3 more years before I left this job.
Seems like you handled that situation well. Staying professional while dealing with a pushy customer can be tough. It's interesting how some people think they can just demand personal info. It's even crazier that he complained afterward. I guess you had to keep facing him regularly. That's awkward. It can be hard to manage customer expectations when they don't get what they want. Glad you managed it without losing your cool.
It's not that strange, but it was awesome. Flight was delayed by like 7 hours. We were constantly migrating from one gate to another. Mainly gate 2 and 14, which were like really far away from each other. It had been around 2 hours since we changed gates. We were on gate 12 I think, thinking that it was settled there. But the airport lady went and said, flight blah 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 to blah blah blah, gate 2. It was the biggest collective AAO I've ever heard. Like, 200 people complaining. It was crazy.
Sounds like a typical airport experience. Those gate changes can be pretty frustrating, especially when you're moving back and forth. I guess it's just part of traveling. The collective reaction of everyone must have been something, though. It's interesting how everyone shares the same disappointment in moments like that. Makes the wait feel a bit longer, I guess.
I had an overnight layover in Heathrow and found what I thought would be an out-of-the-way hallway to nap in for a bit. When I awoke an hour or so later, there was a man asleep in front of me, head to head, both of us laying against the wall, and a 20-somethings couple curled up at my feet. At the time it was awkward and I just GTFO of there as quietly as I could, but looking back it's kind of sweet that those two parties saw me sleeping and thought that it looked like a safe place for them all to lay down their heads as well.
That's an interesting experience. You find a quiet spot to nap, and then end up surrounded by people doing the same. It's funny how airports can turn into unexpected sharing spaces. What felt awkward at the moment now seems a bit nice. They saw you resting and thought it was okay to join. Just goes to show how shared spaces can create these little moments, even if they're a bit strange at first.
I had an overnight at Heathrow Airport when I was 20. I found a quiet corner and snuggled up with my carry-on luggage. About 2 in the morning somebody dropped a chair and woke me up. As I open my eyes I see an Eastern European man with a huge bushy mustache in a sleeping bag about 2 feet away from me. He unzips his bag revealing what I thought at first was a black sweater. As the zipper reached his incredibly fuzzy navel he said in a thick accent, "You want join me?" I swallowed my vomit, grabbed my shit and sprinted halfway across the airport.
That sounds like a strange experience. Sleeping in airports can lead to some awkward situations. The surprise of waking up to that mustache and the offer didn't help. It's good that you trusted your instincts and got out of there.
Worked private security at one, have a few. Had a few Jesus come for a flight and when asked for ID they present the Bible. Had one threaten to kill me and he was arrested. Not very Jesus-like. Had a guy bury a bunch of 9mm ammo he tried carrying on in a Ziploc bag. He was being a complete douche about it and when we finally said he wasn't flying that day, he went outside and buried the rounds in the garden outside one of the entrances. Pro tip, do not hide ammo or anything potentially explosive on federal property. It won't go well. Had a guy steal a handgun from a local range and go to the top of the parking garage and threaten to kill himself and everyone else, not necessarily in that order. Had a failure of a rap artist, not by opinion, career has been a train wreck held up only the status of others, that I won't name have a meltdown during the weekend kicking off spring break. Security was roughly 3 hours long, this asshole tries to walk to the front. Told him to pound sand. Do you know who I am? Bullshit, I thought it was a joke. Laughed and said no. Told him to get to the back. Couple of folks let me know who they were. Still makes me laugh thinking about it.
This sounds like quite a mix of experiences. Dealing with people who think they're more important than they are can be exhausting. The Bible as an ID is a surprising choice, for sure. That guy burying ammo is just asking for trouble, and the meltdown from the artist is classic. Some people really don't understand boundaries. You've got some wild stories from that job.
I've got one, Toledo Airport, December 2016. I'm just leaving my dad's place for a holiday visit. I get through security and belly up to the only bar. I like people watching so I take a look around while I have a drink. Sitting at a nearby table is a guy who looks very homeless. He's very filthy and has his possessions in a garbage bag next to him on the floor. He has food he's purchased on the table and open in his hand is a blue vinyl security pouch. Peeking out as he counts it with his fingertips are what appears to be a stack of large bills. He's through security, so definitely a ticketed passenger. Did he steal it? Did he find it? Did he inherit it? Whatever it was, he decided to get the hell out of town and start over.
This is an interesting scene. It's quite striking how appearances can be misleading. The guy seems to have a tough exterior, but there's a mystery with that money. It's possible he has a backstory that reveals more than what it seems. It's good to think about the different paths people can take, especially when it comes to starting over.
I was at the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania airport this fall for an early morning flight. I'm sitting at my gate waiting and this couple in matching Barry Manilow outfits rolls up. I'm talking a bedazzled Copacabana jean jacket, orange t-shirt with Barry on it and Barry Manilow luggage tags. I think it's odd, but super fans are super fans, so woman shrugging, medium light skin tone. But it got weirder. Some lady who was doing yoga in the main walkway comes over and starts chatting with the Barry Manilow super fans about Barry. I learned that these people literally follow him on tour all around the world and have seen him literally hundreds of times. They met online dating and bonded over their love for him. They even went to a Barry show in NYC after their wedding in their wedding dress and tux. Then the yoga lady shares that her husband is buddies with Barry's sound guy and the super fans are like, you know Steve? I don't remember the name, but same thing, and so then at like 6:30 a.m. this yoga lady calls Barry Manilow's sound guy and is like, I'm at the airport with so and so, do you know them? And the sound guy did. He knew exactly who these people were. It was the absolute most bizarre thing I have ever seen at an airport.
That's quite the scene at the airport. A couple decked out in matching outfits and a random yoga lady striking up a conversation. Superfans always find ways to express their passion, I guess. The connection between the yoga lady and Barry's sound guy makes it even stranger. It's wild how small the world can feel sometimes, especially when it comes to celebrities. Just a typical day of travel, right?
I flew London-Toronto with my family. Pretty busy flight, one of those huge planes with 3 seats, 4 seats, 3 seats, don't know planes too well, maybe a 767. Upon landing, the pilot came on the intercom and told us that we would need to remain seated as the CBSA, the Canadian Border Agency, would need to be checking passports on the plane. Okay, weird but fine. I sat there chatting, the agents came, checked passports. The row across from me there was a lady from India, Indian passport, her new baby, traveling on what looked like a white emergency passport, and 2 men. I remember them because the baby was very quiet for a long flight. Didn't think too much else though. When the agents got to them, they immediately arrested the 2 men, passed the woman and baby to the female officer, then hurried the men off the plane in handcuffs and gently walked the lady out. No fuss from us passengers sitting quietly. About 5 minutes later we got off the plane as normal. I thought it might have been suspicion of human trafficking the mother and/or the baby. Pretty impressive maneuver though.
That's an interesting flight experience. It's definitely unusual for border agents to check passports on the plane like that. Arresting those 2 men right in front of everyone speaks volumes. Seems like they had a good reason to act quickly. The whole situation must have raised some questions among the passengers. It's a pretty organized approach if it was about safety. Glad it ended without causing a scene.
I was the weird person once. I was traveling with a couple bottles of tattoo ink, and I had heard that it's best to try to squeeze the air out of bottle before the flight. As you can imagine, it went horribly wrong. So there I am in a random corner of the airport, before I even went through security, suitcase wide open, black tattoo ink all over the floor and my hands. I couldn't leave my luggage unattended, and I couldn't zip it up without getting ink all over my clothes. I sat there for about 5 minutes just laughing at myself before some kind soul stopped and asked, "Do you need help?" and went to get me some wet paper towel. I went by that part of the airport a year later and there was still a faint black stain on the tile floor.
Sounds like an eventful time at the airport. It's kind of funny how things can go sideways like that. At least you managed to laugh it off. The kind stranger helping you out is a nice touch. That stain on the floor is probably a little reminder of your ink incident. Overall, not the typical travel experience, but it made for a good story.
In the early 2000s, after September 11th, I was working at the SWFL airport. This was in the old terminal and they were putting in the luggage X-ray machines in areas near the curbside entrances. This was all part of the security upgrades mandated because of 9/11. I was working on construction crews doing the modifications to the building around where the X-ray machines were being installed. The airport was not nearly as busy back then as it is now and most of the plane traffic was during the daytime, so we would work overnight to avoid crowds. One night, after midnight, a column of LE vehicles came in and right in the middle were several black SUVs. All of a sudden there were men in suits running around with earpieces and several openly carrying what looked like machine pistols, like a MAC-10. Some TSA agents and a man in a suit came to where we were working and asked us to go with them to an office for security reasons. So we did. We stayed there about 45 minutes, were allowed out and all the SUVs, LE cars and men in suits were gone. We asked what was going on, but no one would tell us and there was nothing in the news about it ever mentioned. My speculation has always been this. The Bush family used to own, and I have been told still owns, a house on the island of Boca Grande. G.H.W. Bush used to vacation there a lot and was an avid fisherman. I think a member of the family had been at their home there and was leaving. Because of the intense security in those days, they just kept it secret. TSA was brand new then, the people working were pretty sharp and dedicated. We knew some of them to speak to and we tried to get them to tell us what was up, but they would just basically blow it off with "I can't tell you."
This sounds like a typical day with heightened security back in the early 2000s. The whole atmosphere must have been tense, especially with all the men in suits and the hidden activities. It's interesting how little was disclosed to you guys, considering the situation. Speculating about the Bush family's potential involvement adds an intriguing layer. People were definitely on edge post 9/11, leading to a lot of speculation and mystery around security protocols.